Hey, everybody, welcome back to Conversations in Ken's Café. I'm your host, Ken Somerville. We have an absolutely special guest on with us today, Mr. Leighton Morrison. If you guys don't know, he's the host of the Soil Matters on this channel. He's an amazing man, and he's been through some amazing things in his life. And he had an epiphany a little while ago, and he wanted to do a special show. So, Leighton, I'm going to just turn this over to you. I'm going to try to stay out of the conversation, just throw in the odd question here and there. But let's talk about your epiphany.
Yeah, so it goes back a while to when I was younger, and it came on to me very strong a couple weeks ago when I reached out to you, Ken. And so let's go back to, we're talking, I think it was the late 70s or late 80s, somewhere in that period of time. I was a teenager. I was, chasing girls and drinking beer and smoking weed.
Normal.
Yeah, an average kid of that day and age, who was, in a teenager, early 20s. And so one of the things that caught my eye, I was very much into popular science, popular mechanics, and oddball channels that had, scientific type themes to them. One of the things that really popped in the cork was the story about a scientist who was trying to find out if people or humans have souls. And his experiment was using a atomic scale. Now, this weighs atoms, and it goes back to the periodic table. I mean, on the periodic table, every element has a weight to it, an atomic weight to it, which is crazy if you think about it. But, that's one of the main reasons that they can determine that these elements are different from each other, because no two atomic elements or no two elements in the periodic table have the same atomic weight.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go off track a little bit here. One of the interesting things we've learned in the last few years is that in a biogeochemical relationship with a plant, if the plant says, I need some molybdenum, right? And it sends out the signal for the specific bacteria to harvest that and bring it back to the roots so that it can be predated in one way or the other, whether the root kills it or whether, the predators actually can eat it and release the nutrient to the plant or the element to the plant. Yeah. And we know now that if the plant can't find that exact atomic weight, I'll say it again, can't find that exact atomic weight, it will go to the nearest atomic weight up or down to that element. That's crazy, right? That's like atomic control or subatomic control. Again, plants are so powerful, we just don't give them enough credit.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, right. So this gentleman was working with hospice, and he would gently get people onto this atomic scale that he actually had it engineered and built so that it was super sensitive, that it could weigh down to the atom. And he'd put these people on the bed while they were still alive and then wait for them to pass. And what he noticed was as soon as they passed, there was the atomic weight went down slightly.
Yeah.
And this blew his mind. So he repeated the experiment many, many times. And it always came back the same, that there was a loss in mass. And so, all right, how do you tie a loss in mass to, say, electricity? You can't, right? Because if the charge goes dead, it's not like the electricity would leave a weight difference, right? So it had to be something other than, like the heart stopped beating, so therefore it lost mass, right?
Yeah.
And so that was, when I read that, it kind of encouraged me to go back to my religious upbringing. I was, brought up in a Episcopalian church from a very young age. I went to Sunday school. And then as I got older and got into my teens, 16, I was done with church. 17, I could only get me to go to holidays with my parents and my family. So I definitely moved on into a different direction. But this kind of, like sparked an interest in me that I kind of was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, I've always thought about souls and how energy can't be created or destroyed. And therefore it kind of just set off a little like bell in the back of my head to pay attention to more of this. So years go by. I have children now. One day I had another epiphany where I said, I feel like I'm being a bad father because I'm not exposing my children to any kind of religious upbringing. I don't want to convert them to any Catholic or Protestant or any of this stuff. I just want them to have, a general broad understanding that there is, religion, and it's something that, helps a lot of people get through life. And so, I don't want to take that tool away from them. If they find later in their life that they need it or want it, that they should be able to have it. So I talked to my wife about it. At that time, she was Catholic, so the only time she went to church was Easter and Christmas, pretty much. And she kind of laughed it off, like, yeah. So I started, I went to the local Episcopalian church, United Church of Christ, and sat in the back row, by myself, like the first time there. I just wasn't really paying, I was paying attention, but I wasn't like really studying the people around me. And then about a little bit more than halfway through, after the sermon, a gentleman sat down next to me, and come to find out, he was the pastor. And so he said, so, what can I do for you? You're a new face. I haven't seen you here before. And, I just want to welcome you and into the church and, see if there's anything I can do to help you. I was like, wow, that's really cool. Thank you. Did not expect that. And so church ended, and I stayed, and, he stayed in the pew with me, and we just kept talking while people left. He didn't get up and greet the people, which is typically what I saw him do from then on out.
Yeah.
So we just kept talking. I basically explained to him, I go, look, dude, I was brought up with religion in my family, in my life, and I'm not doing that, and I kind of feel guilty. He's like, well, why don't you bring your kids to church? You're welcome here. We have Sunday school. They can stay up with you if they want, or they can go down and to the classrooms. It's purely up to you. We're very open here. It's not a strict protocol. And so, I did, and I went probably 3 or 4 times. The second time, the kids were interested in enrolling in Sunday school, so I did. And, the pastor and I had been, talking more and getting a little bit closer. And, this time, like at this point, my wife started getting jealous. It was like, no, we got to go to the Catholic church, right? Because the Catholics, like, they tried to make me swear that I'd bring up my kids Catholic. And I almost punched the priest in the face. I'm like, I'm not signing no contracts. And, well, you can't get married then. And I'm like, well, fine. You don't have a right to marry me. I can get married anywhere I want. So, I went to pre-Cana, which is their, whatever you want to call it, PSYOP friggin' camp, where they pound the importance of Catholic Church into your head, try to convert you. Needless to say, we did get married. We did get married Catholic. But I refused to sign the contract, and it definitely left a stain on my relationship with my father-in-law because he was a devout Catholic. I'd say with my mother-in-law, but whatever, right? Moving on. So now she's jealous, and she's like, we got to go to the Catholic church. And I'm like, fine, we'll go every other Sunday. We'll go, you can come to the Protestant church on one Sunday, and then we'll go to the Catholic church on the other. But I refuse to just solely accept one religious outcome. Catholic church is very different than the Protestant church. Protestant church is about the message. The Catholic church is about ritual. It's the same thing over and over and over again. They have year 1 through 3, and then year 1 starts again. So you're not learning anything new. There's no philosophy. There's no, deeper understanding and interpretation of the Bible and the Bible's messages. And, I basically explained that to her. So she agreed for a short period of time. We did. We went to every other church. Of course, Paula would not go to my church, but I would go to hers.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So then one of the times I was at church, Skip, the pastor, came up to me and said, hey, listen, I'm in a real pickle. I'm like, well, what's the matter? He goes, I have to teach confirmation class to two groups of kids, and I can't be in two places at once. And the deacons at this church have become very passive aggressive, and they're not supporting me and providing me, with volunteers and people that I need to function at this church. I said, why would they do that? He goes, well, because I'm trying to bring in a little bit more progressive, like a little bit of Christian rock and deeper philosophy, more interpretation. I'm like, that's all fantastic. That's one of the reasons why I'm here, is because I want to have a deeper understanding. Like, I believe Jesus was a person, and I believe he was so powerful that at the time, scribes wrote about him, and not one, hundreds of them. And scribes were like only for like royalty and very, very smart people, right? Nobody learned, no one knew how to write back then. Very, very few people, let alone have the tools, the pens, the inks, and the paper to actually write, let alone knowing how to write. So I truly believe that there was a dude, there was a guy that did this crazy stuff and made a big, big impact on people, there forward. And he goes, that's a very good point, but I want to make another point to you. You ever thought about the fact that when he came, and I'm like, no, why would that make a difference? And he's like, well, if he came now, what would we do to him? I'm like, throw him in a psych ward, man, or we kill him. You start doing raising dead people? Are you fucking kidding me?
Area 51 comes to mind.
Yeah, right? Quick, get him out of here, right? There's just something wrong with this cat. And I'm like, yeah, that's a really good point. And he goes, well, if he had come even a year earlier than he did, he'd have been killed if he tried to travel to the next village. Back then, if you got caught in another village, you were either considered cast out by your village, or a danger, like you're a spy spying on them, so the village next door can come over and conquer us and take our resources. Yeah. So you were not treated well. You were pretty much either killed on the spot or enslaved. So you couldn't travel. But once the Romans took over, game changed. Now you could travel all over the place because the Romans were in charge, and the Romans didn't stop you from traveling and prevented you from getting killed in most situations. Now there still was road robberies and all that, but for the most part, you could safely travel all over the country, all over the area back then. And so he pointed out the fact that people's minds weren't polluted. They had pretty much lived their own traditions prior to the Romans, pretty much taking over. The Romans were tolerant of other religions. They had their number of gods that they worship, but they weren't like, you have to do it this way. So they were open to this kind of, what we call a ministry, right? And so he was able to travel all over the place and spread the word. And so that kind of like set off another moment in my head, like, wow, there has to be more to that, right? That the timing was so important. And not only the timing, but the fact that so many people wrote books about it. And his teachings, right? His teachings were in a way that was easy for simple people to understand through parables, right? Stories. Yeah. So, that I popped that in the back of my head and, continued on with my life. And always understanding that, religion was something of kind of, importance beyond just my beliefs or what other people believe. And I dabbled in reading the Bible a little bit. Pretty much got through the New Testament and kind of enjoyed it. Like, I wasn't a big reader, right? But because I was curious, curiosity kills me. Once I get curious on something, I want to know more. I want to understand why I think this way or what's drawing me to this. And then I started reading the Old Testament, and I got bored with it. It was just too complicated. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. And, especially like in the beginning, like, in the beginning there was, no light, no darkness. 7 days God created the world. So to me, it was kind of like, this is I'm not vibing with this, right? It was later in life that I realized it was more, again, kind of the parables or broad strokes of trying to explain this relationship and this, this condition or connection that the Jewish people had with Allah, or not Allah, the supreme being. I forget what God. They didn't. A lot of them didn't believe in Jesus. Like when Jesus came, they thought, oh no, this is a false prophet. But needless to say, moving forward, then there were crises in my life, some near death, or almost dead for a little while, experiences in my life, and that's when it kind of came home. It was like, okay, I'm here for a reason. Like if I was supposed to have gone, I would have gone. Like, I got crushed in a car accident, had a rock climbing accident that I definitely should have died on. I got shot up with sodium pentothal, went into anaphylactic shock, was dead for, 30, 40 seconds before this lady who just happened to be on the only other case that happened in Massachusetts of anaphylactic shock as a result of sodium pentothal, because it was so rare. She had actually been on the other case of this happening and knew what to do. So she rushed in, cleared the room, nailed me with the antidote, and I came back. And like three or 4 days later, I came out of the coma. Right. Yep. And I was like, first thing I did was I touched my nose. I was like, what happened? Why didn't they fix my nose? I had broken my nose 3 times in 3 days. That's what landed me in the hospital. Right.
Okay, like how many doors do you have to walk into, Leighton?
So I got slammed with a soccer ball. I was attacking a defenseman. He got to the ball before I did, kicked it, hit me square in the face, knocked me on my ass, knocked me out cold. Day 2, I was sitting at a desk. It was at private school. We had these big folding lid desks, right? Mm-hmm. And the person behind me said something to me. So I spun around to look at him. His chain snapped. And the fucking thing hit me right on the nose. This is day 2. I'm in the infirmary. The nurse is like, all right, I'm just going to pack you up with cotton. There's really nothing I can do. At least we can stop hemorrhaging. And then the very next day was Sunday, and I was playing, we were playing with ice cubes, having an ice cube war, me and a couple of girls and another buddy of mine. And so I just decided out of the blue, I'm going to take this ice cube and throw it up as high as I can. And it drifted out over onto a tennis court where there was another guy, a senior, who was playing tennis. And he was a very, very intense athlete. So when that ice cube smashed next to him, dude, I saw him turn around, look at me, and jump the friggin' fence in like one leap. And this is, like a 12-foot high fence, right? That's how athletic this guy. He comes at me and just pow, out I go, right? Now they're like, all right, get this kid to the hospital. There's nothing more I can do with him. So the next morning, they bring me into surgery, shoot me up with sodium pentothal. That's it, right? So I come back 3 days later. My parents are crying. My sisters are crying. I'm like, what the fuck happened? What's going on? And they basically explained to me the situation. So, at that point, I'm like, all right, there's something more going on here than meets the eye. So I became very conscious about religion, soul, what I could do to improve myself as a human. Not self-help, but more like self-awareness, paying attention, listening, not just talking. So a big shift in my life. So years go by, and I'm dealing with some very, very tragic events in my life, and struggling to say, like, why would this happen to me? Like, I had a beautiful wife, 3 beautiful kids. I was a great provider. I had 2 big, huge houses, all the cars paid for, and making more money than I knew what to do with. Why would she just divorce me? Why would she take my kids away? Why would all these horrible things happen to me, right? And, for a period of time, about 6 months, I just fell into a scotch bottle, just got hammered. There was no work, dude. I was self-employed since 18. This was the first time in my life I had no work. There was nothing. I couldn't even give away my work. So, what else was I going to do? So finally, I kind of come out of it and sober up and go, I still have 3 kids, that I can't just die, or blow myself up like this. I've got to do whatever I can. Right.
Yeah.
So I come out of it. But again, now I'm in a heightened state of awareness, and like, I come to the conclusion, which led me to where I am today, that I needed to do something that fulfilled my soul, filled my heart, not my pockets, because I've learned that money is not to be trusted. Went through 2 collapses, financial collapses, where my house was worth half what it was the day before, and
Yeah.
questioned all that. So I read the book, The Big Short, started understanding more about the Federal Reserve. What was it? Not Devil's Island, Jekyll Island, and how the Federal Reserve was formed, and how it's not a part of the government; it's a private banking cartel.
Yeah. Most people don't know that.
No, they don't. And so that's when I was like, okay, this is definitely what I'm supposed to be doing. And obviously, I had to have a tragic event, or I never would have gone down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And I had to have no work, right? I had to go through these, shadow of the valley of death, or whatever, this horrible tribulation and trials to end up coming out the other end. And so I came back to what I loved before I got married and got involved with Paula, which was breeding fish with live plants. And that was, I didn't know it at the time, but I was doing aquaponics, because I was selling the fish babies as well as healthy plants to the local aquarium, and making good money on the side, as a side hustle. And so there happened to be this weird connection. Somehow I came across something on the internet that was the 2nd annual World Conference on Aquaculture and Aquaponics down in Cancun, Mexico. Now, I didn't have a lot of money, but I had credit cards. That was the one thing that I did get out of the marriage, was I had very, very high credit. I think it was $150,000 worth of credit limits. So I'm like, all right, whatever. This is meant to be, so I'm going to go. So I went and I met, all these top dudes. Like, I didn't know how powerful they were. Kind of like when I met Elaine. Like, I had no idea who Elaine was, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I met these dudes, and I just was chatting with them, hanging out, drinking, talking theory, and all this crazy stuff. And within a couple of years, I realized that I was dealing with the top aquaculture guy that did the One World aquaponics display at Disney World, right? You got to be pretty good to get there.
Yeah.
Right. Dr. Ricosi, who had a whole course on the Virgin Islands, UVI, and had won all these grants for building different systems, that had developed this one system that, when I looked at it mechanically, because I had started studying right after I left there on all the different methods of aquaculture and aquaponics. And I was like, by far, this guy did it right. This is so KISS, keep it simple, stupid, easy to work on. You can do it above ground, in ground. There's all these different materials and ways of doing this process. So I dialed in on that one, and that became, the focus of my work. Well, I started a small aquaculture system. I started collecting the manure. Actually, I started visiting all the local aquaculture facilities in my area, in Massachusetts, Cape Cod. I even went to one in Pennsylvania, New York, and just started looking at how they were collecting the solids, because I knew, like, that when plants and fish grow together, they do really well, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
so I knew there had to be something in the water that made the plants really happy. So I knew that this was my direction. So I started harvesting different manures, playing with them, bubbling them, trying to put them on different plants and test to see what had happened. And I realized that if it smelled bad, it either killed the plant or it didn't do what I normally did. But if it had that sweet smell to it, it still smelled funky. It was one of those smells where your nose kind of goes, "Whoa, what's that?" Like, if it smells really bad, you go, "Oh, I'm not getting near that shit," right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if it smells good, you kind of like, "Oh, that smells. I'm gonna eat that stuff," right? So it had this funky, like, sweet kind of back aroma on it. And when I put it on plants, they exploded, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I know I'm getting off topic, but I think it's important that we do talk about this. So one thing leads to another. I meet this guy, Jeff Frank. He turns me on to Elaine. I end up down at Elaine's. She, takes me under her wing, teaches me all this stuff, sends me on my path. And I'm out, doing aquaculture or doing, aquaponics in a new way, a newfangled way, by stabilizing compost mixed with worm castings and fish mulch or fish manure, and getting incredible results and starting to make money again, starting to, come out of my shell. So here we go. I've come back from the realm, from the darkness, and I'm on this new path. I'm happy. Like, everybody I work for is like, oh my God, how did you do that? Tell me more. And they get excited because the plants look so great. And so it's very, very rewarding, right? Well, I started to think like, all right, where does the soul come from, right? Some of the new information on cellular function is so deep down the rabbit hole. Like they've got these methods to 3D kind of film the interactions between like oreganolos, and folding proteins, and enzyme creation, and interaction between the cell. I won't get into division because that's like that's a miracle in itself. But bottom line, I started going, all right, well, the cell is so complicated. We've debated till nobody can agree on anything as to where the soul is. Is it in the brain? Is it in the heart? Is it in the stomach? And I came back to like, all right, well, cells, right? Cells can communicate with each other. They can transfer information. They can transfer genetics. They can transfer RNA.
So now, are we talking quantum entanglement?
No, not quite quantum entanglement. Just think about it as cellular health, like a cell as an individual organism itself, right? Okay. So we all know we have, millions of different types of cells and millions, trillions of cells overall. And yet our body functions, right? And so there has to be a communication between all the cells so that each one knows what to do and when to do it. Like if say you get cancer, well, they build a tumor around it, right? So there was messaging sent throughout the whole body to say, whoa, we got a problem. Spill on aisle 9, right? Bring the fire department out. Let's get this solved, right? And so I go, all right, so we know that this vessel, because I truly believe it's only a vessel.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. That's kind of where you end up when you really dive down these kinds of rabbit holes. Well, there still had to be a master of the body, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe there wasn't a master body. Maybe the cells were the master. And we've had this conversation before. It's like, who's in charge, right? Are the plants here to harvest us? Or are we here to harvest the plants? Like, what's going on? Like, who's really in charge? And so that made me start thinking, all right, well, if individual cells have individual control over themselves and their functions, and they can communicate on a whole with the rest of the body and in all these different functions, that's deeply, deeply entangled in the whole. Like in again, you can't put your finger on it. Is the electricity, the spirit, the thing in charge, or are the cells in charge? Or when the body finally quits and shuts down, do they all quietly go? And I can honestly say no. In my dealings with my father at the very end, his cells kept fighting, even though he was technically just a baby. He couldn't do anything. But yet he'd wake up every day, and then he was at the point where my sister just barely could handle him anymore. She couldn't get him to the bathroom. It was hard to change his diapers. He was like eating less and less, being less coherent. So she called it hospice, and hospice came in and explained the process to us, and what we need to do. And about a week after they started being involved, they're like, okay, it's time. And I go, what do you mean it's time? He says, well, it's time to let him pass. And I go, well, why wouldn't he just pass naturally? And he goes, there's this thing that sometimes the body just refuses to go. And I'm like, yeah, but he's a deeply religious guy, man. He was deacons and all kinds in the church, all the way up the top of it, just short of a pastor. And he knew that, there's life after death, and this is what he preached. And so why would he be fighting the freedom of being allowed to go to the next level, right? So you don't have to worry about food, money, nothing. You're free. Your energy, your raw energy at that point, and you can be anything you want. And so he and I, the gentleman that was the hospice head nurse, had some deep conversations about this and religion, cells, and understanding health, and bodily functions. So he said, okay, it's time. And I'm like, all right, well, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to, give him these series of drugs, every night, and then every morning, and get him comfortable. And so I'm like, okay, so I get him comfortable, and then the body relaxes and he goes, right? So a couple days later, or maybe 3, he comes back and he says, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean, what am I doing? He goes, well, I got an order. Here's more meds, but why isn't he passed? And I'm like, well, dude, I kept him comfortable. I did exactly what you told me to do. And he's like, well, you didn't read between the lines. Like, you're supposed to dose him more and more and more until he goes. So I'm like, you want me to kill my fucking dad? He's like, don't look at it like that. You're forcing the spirit to let go, or the cells to give up, whatever you want to believe. Like, but it's important that you do this because your sister's suffering, you're suffering, he's obviously suffering, right? He's not in a coherent state. He's not coming back from this. So I'm like, fuck me. So I go, all right. He left, and I just started dosing my dad. Finally, at 2:00 in the morning, I heard his last gasp. I'm like, okay, he's gone. So then I call, the hospice number, and they send over a Jamaican lady, which was really interesting. And this is what she does for a living, and she collects bodies right after they pass. She's got protocols. She's got to clean them, get them in a position where they don't go rigor mortis, and now they can't fit in a coffin. So she goes through her whole thing. I have to help her, which was, thank God I was in a state of shock, or I probably wouldn't have been able to handle it. But we get him wrapped up, and I go upstairs, tell my sister, hey, Dad's gone. I don't know if you want to say goodbye to him. The Jamaican's here. She's got him pretty much, taken care of, sorted away. And my sister said, I can't deal with it. All right, just go to sleep. Yeah. See you in the morning. So again, this thought of like how strong the body fought to stay alive when if there was a soul, would have been gone, right? It would have been gone because there was nothing left. It was a shell. So that made me think, okay, the soul has to be in the cells themselves, because what else would have kept him alive? The saying, oh, don't sell your soul, right? I got hundreds of examples of people that sold their souls. Like these wealthy people that are so miserable because all they're worried about is everyone stealing their money. Why? Because they stole it, right? So they sold themselves into misery for money. And it goes on and on. I mean, whether, you hear of these people committing suicide after getting into pornography, or committing suicide as it related to, drugs that just overtook their body, or other things, right? Mental illness, but
financial collapse.
Right. There's so many different reasons why people commit suicide, right? And to me, that's like the ultimate step against the gift of life, right?
Mm-hmm.
You commit suicide, you're basically saying fuck you to the universe or whatever you want to believe, God, because they gave you this beautiful opportunity to live here and figure your own shit out. Like we had deep conversations about this as God school. We're here to be tortured. This isn't about having fun and playing and partying. Life is tough. The struggle is fucking real, and I think most people can attest to that. There's ups and downs. Sure, there's some great times, but there's also a lot of struggles. And
Mm-hmm.
what doesn't kill you does make you strong, as long as you don't sell your soul in the path. And a lot of people end up selling their soul off for things, right? Whether it's possession or money or power, and you can see it in them, right? Like, well, I'm an empath. Maybe not all people can see it. I tend to think that there are a lot of zombies or drones on the planet, like people that have,
Extras.
yeah, like what do they call them in the games? Third party. They're basically like part of the game, right?
NPCs,
Yeah,
I think is what they call them.
yeah. So I truly believe there's a lot of them, interacting with us as well. And my case for that is when I'm driving and I drive by somebody and all of a sudden they speed up or they see me put my blinker on and then they speed up and cut me off. Like I woke them. Like I my energy woke them up from the trance or the game. The game like said, oh, activate, interact, right? So now let's wrap this back all the way up. So here's all my experiences. Here's all my ammunition or my evidence to coming to the understanding that perhaps the soul is in each and every cell of our body. And then, I started applying this, and this is where the epiphany came from. Was, one of the things I did early on after I learned, microscopy, soil biology, plant health, plant pathology, and all of this crazy shit that I went through, the immersion class with Elaine. I would go to these pristine places all around Connecticut. And I was in the northwest corner. It's a very affluent area, good bit of farming, but there's a lot of mountains and creeks and rivers and lakes. And I started, taking samples of the water. And of course, I started with, the rivers and the streams and the lakes. And realized that what I should be seeing was not there. And I'm like, but this is healthy area. There's no one spraying pesticides around here. There's some farms dotted around, but this isn't like the middle of friggin' Iowa. So why isn't there more life in these, in these aquatic areas? Well, I did a little bit more research and realized that there was a lot of industry, in the 40s and 50s and 60s there, especially along the rivers, right? And the rivers drain into, or creeks drain into the rivers drain into the lakes and reservoirs. And so started putting two and two together. Oh, this is legacy pollution that's doing this damage. It's not just the agriculture. And then there were like, okay, there's a lot of high-end residences that are near this waterway, and I'm sure they're spraying all kinds of stuff to make their roses grow and their lawns immaculate, so they don't have any weeds. So there's some, pressure from that area too. But it broke my heart. It broke my soul that in these pristine areas that should be full of biological life, there was nothing. And one of the key things is rotifers, right? Rotifers are a multicellular organism that harvest bacteria. They're a protist, they're a protozoa, so they release nutrients. But more importantly, they're the feedstock for fish. Fish lay eggs. The eggs become not larvae. There's another term for them. We'll call
Fry.
them. Well, no. Yes, fry. Then fingerling. Then fish. So with the fry, they still have the little egg sac, right? So they have some food, some residual food from the egg phase. so that they're weaning on to the new food and this that they're being exposed to in their aquatic environment. Well, that's rotiforms. So I was like, oh, that's why all the stocking ponds that were on all the lakes or reservoirs were there, was because of the Industrial Revolution. They didn't realize it was killing off the very things that fed the fry into a fingerling. So they would rear them in these raceways and then release them into the streams and into the lakes and the reservoirs as a way to bridge that very, very important second stage of the fish's life. And so it started to go, aha, look, I'm putting all the pieces together, right? And I'm like, all right, I've got to figure out a way to be able to do my job without getting depressed, because I was getting depressed. The more I looked, the more I got depressed. And all right, so I came up with a way to imagine what that was in 1850. Why I chose 1850, I don't know. But for whatever reason, 1850 popped into my head. So, back then it would have been, some civilization, some electricity, not like, like living in Little House on the Prairie, but you could travel. You could go around the world back then. Yeah. And to some degree, there was more to that than meets the eye. I mean, if you get into Tartaria, free energy, cathedral designs, building designs, resonance, healing vibration, that was like the end of the golden age. That was just before the institutions that operate pretty much the globe at this point in time were tearing down the great monuments, the world fairs, the cathedrals. Boston burned to the ground. Chicago burned to the ground. So many cities burned to the ground back then. And that was their way of eradicating the technology that was making us so powerful at that, just prior to that. Because we didn't pay for energy. We didn't pay for anything, right? We'd go to church and you'd be healed because your vibration would be vibrated like we call that sound healing nowadays. But back then it was done on a weekly basis or even daily basis. And if you got sick, you didn't go to the pharmacy. You went to a healer who had been handed down thousands of years of how to cure, not knock off the friggin' side effects, cure you, right? So there was no money in medicine. The medicine people were often the poor, crazy people in the village because they were considered like woo-woo, like, oh my God, this guy can heal me or this woman can heal me. She's got superpowers. Like, I don't, they were outcasts, but yet they healed us. So I would visualize 1850 wherever I went. And I still have this power today. Like when I'm looking on a job, I go, okay, how beautiful if this place would have been in 1850. And how can I bring it back, at least in my little way, to what the health of the soil was at that point in time. And I know, like I've seen it over and over and over again, I can bring the whole ecology back in. Like it starts with the soil, right? We know you get the soil health, then the plant health, then the bugs return, the bees return, butterflies return, birds return, and then more and more you see the complete evolution or ecology of what was there. Maybe not to the degree, but it's definitely very rewarding. I mean, you feel really good about doing this type of work and saying, okay, as long as you don't spray anything here ever again, chances are this ecology is going to stay here and just get it better and better and better over the years. Now, it doesn't always work because of our water systems, the chloride, the chloramine. I'm not even going to talk about chemtrails and all that shit, but it's definitely on the better path, and it might take longer for it to come back, but we know for sure if we get rid of the humans, take the humans out of the picture, nature comes back, and very quickly, or I should say significantly quick compared to what it's doing when we are a part of the system. So,
well, it took her billions of years to put it to this way. It's taken us hundreds of years to crush it back to where it is. But I want to point out one very drastic fact that even the World Health Organization said by 2030, we're not going to be able to support ourselves through our own cropland. And that cycle break is going to either end all of us or it's just going to do a reset. But if we can't support ourselves because we've killed off all the biology, and Leighton, we are just vessels. That energy that is our soul, if you want to call it that, yeah, it has to populate every single cell in our body for that communication flow. But like, it's energy, frequency, vibration. It's when you stop that, like if you're unconscious, your mind is gone, your body still keeps functioning because that's how it's been designed to do. And even if you're not in control of it, it wants to keep going. But I just wanted to point that out quickly.
yeah, 2030 scares me. 2030 agenda scares me. Just the next 3 years, if we keep growing and doing what we're doing at this pace, who knows where the hell we're going to end up? Is AI going to take over? Is it going to be Terminator time? The elite's going to take over and virus us all out, or we're going to starve to death, or they're going to be another catastrophe of some kind. Who knows? But we're traveling at the speed of light, and we're running out of runway. There's going to be consequences across the board because we're global now. It's not just my country versus your country. We're all
species. We should look at it as a species, not as
but that's been taken away from us, right? I mean, that's their control, was never allow us to be a species. Like if 1850 had continued the way it was, we would be so advanced right now. It's not funny. We'd be so advanced because we wouldn't be slaves to a system of money, right? There was barter, there was trade. It wasn't, all directed to a single currency or multiple currencies. And to be honest with you, back in the day, people didn't like money changers because they were always cheating. So there was a lot more barter and trade going on than there was money exchange so that I can buy what I want with the money. It was way easier to trade. So going forward, I was like, okay, so if every little piece of my body, every different cell type is communicating with all the other cell types that are all doing different functions, other than the stem cells, they're the unique ones. They're like the God cell. They can do it. They can replicate into any kind of cell. Why do we not look at the earth the same way? So it starts in the soil, but the largest fauna and flora are a huge piece of the whole until we, overran it. Like maybe, all right, the flat earthers, we're in a petri dish. Sure, I can't say no. I've never been to space. I've never been past the firmament and into the upper atmosphere. So I can't say yeah or no. I mean, some of the old maps show Antarctica all the way around. I mean, they show Tartaria. They show all kinds of things. There were maps from the 1500s before Antarctica was ever discovered, right? So flat earthers, I'll give you your piece, right? Maybe, especially you shoot a laser across a salt flat that's 20, 30 miles across, that should have dropped, right? There should have been a curvature.
Yeah.
I can't deny that, right? But I don't fully believe it, but I can't deny it. And so I stick with, okay, it is a globe, right? It is spinning in space. And, there's astrology astrophysics that kind of explain like sacred geometry, the golden rule, right? And if
Mm-hmm.
you look into space and you look into, studying of stars and planets, it all follows the same pattern, right? So it's very difficult to say that space is not true, planets are not true. I can't deny it based on what I've understood or learned or read about it. I was very blessed to work with Harvey Hubble, and got a chance to talk to him about his dad, and his dad was a wild man, just a wild man. But he
out there.
yeah, oh, I can tell you stories. He had a lot of kids with a lot of different women, but anyway, he was like, yeah, he brought the understanding of astronomy to the masses. Like before that, we were kind of like, yeah, we had the telescope, yeah, we understood this or that, but there was the bigger picture that we didn't get, like the understanding of nebulas, right? Star birthing places. We didn't understand novas or supernovas or
Mm-hmm.
white dwarfs or red giants. And so he really kind of blew it open about that. So again, with these kinds of information and interactions, it's very difficult to say, no, we're on a flat earth, right? It's very difficult to say that. It's not possible, but it's kind of like, well, I mean, that would have to be like really kind of impossible that we aren't on a planet spinning around the sun. It would be very, very difficult to completely deny that. So looking at the earth as a Garden of Eden, with all these different species interacting and reacting, it was in balance. Like if something ran away, something got out of control, it self-corrected, right? Predator or prey. If all the prey died, the predators went away. Then the prey came,
Yeah.
and then the predators came back. So there was a cycle. It was a balance, and that's how we achieved such incredible, giant organisms and megafauna and flora, was because there was a balance. And even the redwoods, as they grew and grew and grew, or some of the giant trees prior to like all the volcanic activity, when the plate tectonics started shifting and went from Gondwana to all the different continents, those were all self-correcting, right? There was corrections. There were organisms that were left here, but they didn't make it to over there. Kind of rebalanced the whole thing. But even still, there was still, mass migrations, whether it was through aquatic species or birds or even insects. And so everything was getting reseeded and repopulated. There are special places like platypuses live only in Australia. There's some crazy trees in Madagascar. What are those little hoppy things? They only live there as well. So there were some, exceptions to the rule. For the most part, the world stayed as a balanced ecosystem until we really put an end to that. So, is the Earth a life form with its own soul? Is it crying to us? Is it screaming at us? Is that why I feel that dread, that depression about, oh my God, what have we done? Because I'm a part of that. I'm a cell on the ecosphere of the planet, and so that hit home hard, and it kind of explained a lot to me about where I am, where I'm going, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. And I just thought, I just don't think enough people think about it that way. Maybe they don't have time. Maybe they don't have the bandwidth, right? But maybe if some more people did, like the awakening after COVID, right? How many people got into gardening and soil? And like, what am I eating? What am I drinking? Right? So that gave us a period of time to reflect on, what are we doing? I'm working all these hours. I'm losing ground every year. Every year I have to work harder. I have to get another job or get a raise somehow. how do I get a raise? Well, I have to sell a bit of my soul. I have to work harder, or like the corporate structure. My
Mm-hmm.
daughter went to business school. And some of the lessons she came back and tried to teach me were horrifying. Like, step on everybody to get ahead. Don't steal their ideas and call them your own. Lie, cheat, steal. Do whatever you have to do to get ahead, and make it till you fake it, or fake it till you make it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no wonder we're so self-destructive and so narcissistic as a species. But anyway, hopefully this hits the right ears somewhere in time, whether it's now, tomorrow, or in the future, and gets more people thinking about soul and the soul of the planet. The indigenous had it right. The indigenous had it right. And they believed that when you passed, your energy was not created or destroyed. It moved into something else. Maybe it was a bird, maybe it was a frog, maybe it was a turtle. But it moved on. And in many ways, you had a choice, or perhaps the choice was made for you, that you got to come back as a certain animal or a certain aquatic organism or whatever. But again, when you start to go and think about, well, the planet is a giant soul, and I am a part of the tiny, tiny little part of that body, that vessel that's moving this planet through time and space on this giant loop around the Milky Way. Maybe I do need to be a little bit more respectful of my surroundings and my plants and the animals. And, if I see a turtle, maybe I should stop and put it on the other side of the road instead of just blowing past it, not worrying about it. So hopefully this falls on the right ears, that maybe get somebody a little more excited to do their part.
Yeah. Well, and I hate to say it, but most people don't even have the respect for their own bodies and what they put into it. I think that's part of the beginning of the next phase of understanding. If we can heal ourselves through the soil, through the biology that exists, and think of it as this matrix of a computer system and all of the energy flowing. Is it all the biology that's giving feedback to the planet on what the planet needs to do? Is it the biology in our bodies that is giving us feedback, going, okay, I need these components, and where are you getting them? We used to get them from our food, from the animals we ate, and now with what we've done, and like you said, it's going back decades upon decades when the educational system was modified to be a program instead of an education. That's where we really had the first step of deception of reality, because the victor wrote the history and it's not necessarily the reality. Leighton, you and I have both, looked at, conspiracy theories for, decades of time. How many of those conspiracy theories from even 2 years ago have become scientific fact? Like, even just, the in the 60s, the tree huggers, and now they're proven that if you actually interact with the tree, you can gain part of that energy back into yourself. And this is scientific fact now. Like, how many ways can a plant see you, energetically, in full color? All these ways that
They have colors we can't see. They're on full spectrum, man. They're not just this narrow little band of light.
Yeah. And I think that's the next step of where we need to start to understand is everything is interconnected. I mentioned quantum entanglement. Even at that layer of protons and neutrons, everything is connected. You can't have one without the other. They just can't, work the way they're supposed to. The more we interfere, the harder it is for them to work. And energy, frequency, vibration. that energy that we are, that essence, that soul that we have never dies. That's where I tell people that have lost a loved one, you've lost their physical form, but you've never lost who they were. Their essence, their connection to you exists forever. If you have, the ability to close your eyes and go back to a point in your life where you were that happy, and when you do that, okay, I feel better now, I'm not stressed anymore. That's your photographic memory of every moment of your existence. You have the ability to key back in. Our problem is making that connection. We can only do it at certain points, whether those are good points, bad points in our life. But that connection is there when you allow yourself to look inside of yourself and make that connection with the energetic being that you are. And we've mentioned the religion before the Catholic Church was the pagan religions, worshiping the gods. It was the Catholics that started to, write things down. But I look at, all of that in essence as, taking the good out of it and leaving the bad, the 10 commandments. Is it about, following a doctrine, or is it about your moral values and what you will allow yourself, the small part, like Leighton mentioned, selling your soul? Are you willing to do that? Leighton's not willing to do that. I'm not willing to do that. But you all have the choice to make when you are in that type of a situation where, if you do this, I'll give you this. Are you willing to sell who you truly are? And that's where your soul is being sold. And I don't want to see that to happen to anyone. And especially Poe and Cheeto, they have souls too. Your plants have souls. You give thanks for that food you're ingesting, that plant or that animal. The air we breathe has enough biology in it to grow your plants. That's where your plant gets most of its carbon from. Are you even aware that what you're breathing in is actually helping you and your cells to grow? This is where, step back. We're here in essence to learn. These physical forms are just that, physical forms. That's where, the body doesn't want to stop working until that lesson has been learned. And that's when the soul will move away. But those lessons, like, I've almost died several times. Leighton's almost died. There's lots of people out there that have taken these lessons and broadened their understanding of what is true and what is real. That's where get out in the sun very first thing in the morning helps to energize you. Leighton does it all the time. These types of things, reconnecting, but being sovereign within yourself, making your own decisions, is one of the most important things that you can ever do, and learn from your mistakes. We all make mistakes, but if you went back and thought of them, have you meditated on them like Leighton does, like I do, going, okay, this is what happened. What can I learn from this? Can I go forward from this? There, in that moment of time that you accept the lesson, you can move forward from that moment, and it can't hold you back anymore. Step out of the trap and move forward.
Don't forget grounding. Grounding
Yes.
is another very important, whether you ground with your hands in the soil, cultivating it, or you walk barefoot. It's another critical piece. We have the tools, we have the sun, we have the grounding, we have the vibration, the Schumann resonance. So learn to
Yep.
be a human. Learn to be a human again. So it looks like we have some questions, Ken. I got a couple of pups that are looking to do their rounds. So let's bust through the questions and call it a chapter.
Okay, sounds good. We started with Tio Mimo. If a wave is also a particle, what is the weight of the particle in the wave?
Well, that goes back to the periodic table, right? So an element has mass. Light can be a wave or it can be a vibration. So does it have mass? Well, we know that a proton has mass, but as soon as you get beyond that into the subatomic particles, we can't weigh them. Muons, and there's like three of them, and there's more, like boson-Higgs particles. There's no way to measure it. It's beyond our capabilities. So, yeah, we got a lot left to learn. That's for sure. Maybe in the future, sometime, we'll be able to capture these, subatomic particles in a way that is stable. But just thinking of trying to separate an electron and weigh it, when they come together as a molecule, sure. And we know that, some of these elements can share electrons or trade electrons, so they have other powers. But I can't say that there's really a way to weigh a wave or a vibration. I think maybe that they're not supposed to be.
Well, and look at technology. Maybe in a year's time, we'll be able to do that and measure it. But as a cannabis grower and indoor cultivator using different lights, we look at the frequency of the light, and we found out that there's frequencies that we weren't using and that are beneficial. It's so much that if you look at the ultraviolets, people using the special machines to kill pests, but killing themselves because they're not taking the proper precautions. Frequency, vibration, energy, it's three different ways of looking at the exact same thing. And your plant looks at those exact same things, uses it for different methodologies. It takes it in, as a cell, doing this specific function, but the cell right next door is taking a different frequency, using that same whole stream, but picking up different things. Think of a radio where you tune it to a specific frequency to get the music that you wanted. Don't think that our cells and our bodies, when we go outside and stand in the sun, isn't taking in that energy, frequency, vibration, and each cell is using it a little bit different. Each cell, think of it as a complete universe, a city state that can fit tens of billions of people. It takes a long time to fill that cell up with all those people. It's kind of like filling up biochar. You have to give it that time. That's where our soils are right now. We're teetering on the edge of needing that energy, frequency, vibration, instead of blocking it the way that we have been doing. But I do want to send out a huge thank you to Super Tinker 41 for the $25 donation to the channel.
Thanks,
thank
brother.
you very much.
Go ahead.
With that,
I was going to say, you see how Cheeto keeps circling up here and looking at me?
I know. Okay. Well, we'll quickly go through this other one here. They changed the hertz of modern music.
Yes, they did.
That goes back to the energy, frequency, vibration.
I can't listen to music anymore. I just can't.
Yeah.
I listen. There are some. If on Instagram, there's some cool cats that are tuning to the correct frequency, and the music they play is incredible. It's soothing. It's eye opening. It's pretty powerful. Perky's been working on some of that. So cool. There are ways to get back to the old ways,
and they go back to the ancient ways. And this is like we're talking about the church bells.
Yep.
That sound frequency healing. And now, where are there any of these bells left?
Dude, the Chinese went and stole all the Tibetan bells, all of the healing bells, when they took over all the monasteries. Pauline and I went to this place down in Arizona. I forget the name of it. It's the rock crystal capital of the world. Like, there's always events there where they trade crystals from all over the world. There was a couple places off the beaten path in the back that they had thousands of these singing bowls. And Pauline actually bought a couple of them. She wanted a whole set, but the set was expensive. But
Yeah.
oh my God, you ping them and you can feel it going through you. Like, if you've ever done, the crystal bells and meditation, your whole head starts going woo, 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 woo. It's crazy. Yeah. There's a lot to that, and the healing quality of sound and vibration.
Yeah. So we got one last question here, and Cheryl, I don't think we have time for that. What is Ken's story? How did Leighton and Ken meet?
Well, you came on to Peter's channel, and then you took over our producership of Brian and mine, and so that's how we first met. And that was what, 5-6 years ago? It's a minute.
Something close to over 5. But you and Brian, and this, you guys, is on the Future Cannabis Project, which that channel doesn't exist anymore. But they were doing a program talking about growing plants, etc., organically, and they asked for guests. Okay, they wanted guests that would come on and talk to them, and I applied with Brian and ended up coming on with you guys on your channel and doing a 3-hour podcast with you guys, and I had so much fun. And yeah, I ended up becoming your producer and had a blast there. So as for my story, I'll do that another day, Cheryl. But Leighton, your puppies want to go run around and have fun. Thank you so much, brother, for sharing your experiences and your life's journey. It's amazing how in tune to reality more people are becoming as the veil is thinning. We are winning, guys. It's just I can keep saying, pop the popcorn, sit back, enjoy the show, observe, watch what's going on, but you don't need to absorb that negative energy. If we stay positive, we change things for the better. We're affecting the human resonance, guys, because there's more and more of us since the vid that have become aware of reality. So keep your energy high, help to raise everybody's energy around you. It's as simple as just give everybody a smile. It actually raises vibrations. So, Leighton, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, one other thing is we humans need to become the best listeners. Because when we're doing this, more often than not, we're talking negatively about what's going on around us. If you become the best listener in the room, you will not only learn a lot, but you'll go away with a better feeling because you're not talking negative. I mean, it's so easy to talk negative. It's so hard to talk positive. It's so hard to be happy for people. And to say that, hey, I'm really happy for you. Congratulations on that accomplishment. But you don't get to learn of their positive things because you're talking too much. So become the best listener is the easiest way to raise your vibration. And then be thankful and grateful to the people that you are listening to and compliment them. Giving a compliment, giving someone encouragement are the greatest self-rewards that we can get. So that's my final 2 cents on that one. Ken, thank you very much for hosting this. I had to get that off my chest. Hopefully I didn't meander too much and I made the point that I'd hoped to make.
And I'm sure that you did, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to, open their eyes because of what was said on this show today. And Anytime, Leighton, that you need to vent, brother, just let me know. We'll set up a show that you can vent.
There you go. Well, thank you, my friend, and thank you for all the work that you do, both with this channel, this whole network.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Give us all a place to talk.
It's needed, and I'm very happy to be able to be here and help. And guys, love you all. I'm gonna hit end the stream, and we'll see you tomorrow night with me and Andy on Gardens the Untold Story.